got to take the technology that we've got and extend it beyond typical practice. And what I'm going to talk to you primarily about today is some training that we've been doing using caregivers. But I hope that what you'll see is that this same approach might be applicable not only to caregivers and teachers, we're going to talk primarily about educational context in schools as an organization, but more broadly. Now, this became an important aspect for me because I realized that periodically I get asked what I do, just in the course of normal conversation. People say, what do you do? And I very rarely say, I am a behavior analyst. And this is a weird omission because I work at a university that's well known for a PhD program in behavior analysis, in the behavior analysis area, teach courses on assessment and intervention of problem behavior. My research has to do primarily with training educators and improving the extent to which students and other children with and without disabilities maintain appropriate academic performance. In my spare time, I use behavior analytic procedures to train horses, good ground manners under saddle, and my husband even sometimes suggests that I must have him on a behavior management plan. So, more than any other description that I could give, I'm a behavior analyst is the description. So why not answer, I'm a behavior analyst? Well, mostly because I actually like to have conversations with people, and I found that answering, I'm a behavior analyst, quickly terminates conversations with one of 4 reactions, none of which are overly positive. They tend to go something like this. Oh. Or they change the subject. So you like West Virginia? Boy, it's a nice day. Can you imagine how much rain we've been getting? Could you believe it's snowing in Pittsburgh? Which it was when I left. Or something along the lines of confused. They've never heard about behavior analysis before. They say, you're a behavior analyst, what's that? I don't know what that is. They're worried. Oh, behavior analysis is for kids with autism. That's what they do. My niece has autism. It's a horrible thing. Or my least favorite line of all time, uh-oh, are you analyzing my behavior right now? Or they're suspicious. They say, I've heard about this behavior analysis thing, and I don't think we should be controlling people's behavior. So you can see how any of these reactions put a quick termination to what might otherwise be a relatively pleasant conversation. So if we're really going to expand our impact, we've got to get beyond these misperceptions about what behavior analysis is and what it can do. And this means that we've got to reach out to people who might not otherwise hear about our science and practice. I believe that behavior analysis can contribute to most aspects of our science, to most aspects of our society. This includes business, medicine, social practices, and education. Recently, Pat Fry's argued that to have this kind of impact, behavior analysts must start working what he calls under the dome. This means that we're working on problems that are of mainstream relevance to society, not just issues that are isolated to a particular context or a particular minority population. In a subsequent article published in The Behavior Analyst, he went on to describe one way to move under the dome. He said that was through collaboration with primary care medicine and with pediatricians. So today I'm going to argue that another way that we can improve dissemination and have a larger impact is through caregiver training, with a specific focus today on training educators. So to do this, I'm going to describe 3 recent studies in which we trained educators to think and act as a behavior analyst. We run into trouble in the schools because the contingencies on teacher behavior are fairly weak. The administration and administrative role in helping to shape appropriate behavior is often next to non-existent. So our idea here is to get teachers into contact with some of the reinforcers associated with positive practice and have them begin to function in an administrative, at least self-administrative role, where they're able to deliver reinforcers and we're able to get maintenance of behavior change across time. So I'll describe the impact of the training and I'll talk a little bit about the potential for future dissemination. I'm going to describe a series of 3 studies, the first of which is showing the effects that trained teachers can have on their students even when a behavior analyst doesn't intervene with the student directly. This is an issue that we run into in West Virginia. West Virginia is a very behavior analytically poor state. So in the state of West Virginia, last time I checked on the BCBA website, there were 18 board-certified behavior analysts across the entire state. This means that when people need services, there's not somebody right down the road that they can turn to, and when they can't get in touch with the behavior analyst, there's typically barriers associated with paying for those services or with geographically getting from one place to another to obtain those services. So being able to train people and have some collateral effects might be really important in this area. And we know that teacher attention can be a very important and valuable reinforcer for students, and that teachers often allocate their attention poorly. That is, teachers have a lot to do, they have many competing demands in their behavior, and what tends to get their attention is problem behavior. So what they tend to attend to is that problem behavior, and they're much more likely in general to reprimand behavior than to reinforce or praise positive behavior. And rates of praise tend to be very low. In some situations, this leads to increased rates of off-task or problem behavior from students who are vying for teacher attention and don't particularly care that the attention that they're getting is negative in form, so the teacher is reprimanding or telling them to stop. And a common recommendation to those caregivers is to ignore problem behavior and catch the child being good. That is to praise appropriate behavior. But few studies have actually evaluated the extent to which you can easily change that form of teacher behavior and get teachers to begin to attend to the relevant parts of their environment, and the extent to which that carries over and actually causes changes in students' behavior. So the purpose of our study was twofold. We wanted to evaluate if feedback, part of a common behavioral skills training package, would result in changes in how teachers allocate their behavior. We were looking specifically here at rates of praise and reprimands. And then to evaluate if the changes in teacher behavior would result in changes in student behavior. So this is part of an ongoing teacher training program that we have running where our teachers are taking some formal coursework in behavior analysis. 4 special education teachers participated. All of our teachers had master's degrees in education or special education and ranged from 27 to 54 years old. They've been teaching between 3 and 25 years. So we've got quite a spread here. All of our teachers were participating in formal behavior analysis classes. They've taken about 3 classes at this point. And for all of our teachers, we identified a student in the classroom who was reported to engage in some form of off-task or problem behavior during instruction, and who received either one-on-one or small group instruction from the teacher. Now for Rita, we actually identified 2 students in her classroom. Rita was a high school teacher of autism, and she had a couple of students who were engaging in very high rates of problem behavior and off-task behavior that was becoming dangerous because of the size and strength of the students. All of our sessions were conducted during regularly scheduled instructional activities, so we're really going in and working within the context, which might seem unimportant at the moment, but I'll help you realize the importance of that piece as I progress through my talk today. So as I mentioned, we went in and observed during regularly scheduled instructional activities for about 10 minutes at a time. During this time, we measured the rates of teacher praise and reprimands that were delivered to the targeted student or to the group as a whole. So if the teacher said, "Hey, Bob and Billy, cut that out," that would be scored as a reprimand. We also measured the extent to which the students were on and off task. So were they engaging in the targeted instructional activity that was planned for that period, or were they doing something else? During our baseline, we just measured what was happening in the classrooms. There were no instructions to the teacher, there was no feedback on performance. During our feedback phase, we provided graphical and verbal review of the teacher behavior with the teacher, and intermittent praise or praise, right? So if the teacher's praising the student, then we're praising the teacher, and some delay, and some constructive suggestions if we thought that the teacher could do better. So these are the data for our 4 teachers who participated. The form of attention in form of a rate, responses per minute, is along your y-axis, with observations and sessions along your x-axis. Praise is the closed circles, and reprimands are the open circles. So there's a fair bit of variability in our baseline, and one of the things that I want to call your attention to here is that the scales are different for each of these teachers, and some of them go pretty high. So if you look for Jill, the top end of her scale is 5 statements per minute, which is a really high rate of attention directed to any individual student, much, much higher than what's been shown in previous literature. So this suggests, although we don't have really good evidence of this, that even just getting some training in behavior analytic concepts, even before we provide feedback, is elevating the extent to which these teachers are already incorporating praise. So It's very unusual to see rates of praise that consistently are elevated above rates of reprimands when you just walk into a classroom. So these may be some idiosyncratic baseline data. Either way, we felt that we could continue to increase rates of praise or at least increase the differentiation and decrease rates of reprimands. And we did that through our feedback phase, which was a consistent effect across all of our teachers. Okay, not shocking. So behavioral skills training, including feedback, improves performance. What is, to me, interesting is that these data show on-task and off-task behavior for the students of the teachers. So they're in a row, James was Kim's student, and so on and so forth. These relatively minor changes and this relatively easy package that produced these changes in teacher behavior produced for most of the students correlated changes in their on-task behavior that were fairly dramatic and were socially valid to these teachers. So these teachers were having a lot easier time getting instruction in because the students were actually attending to instruction when it happened. The only possible exception to this is Alex, whose behavior didn't change that much because he was fairly well on task during our baseline observations. Again, maybe not that shocking. So when teachers allocate their attention better and they're providing more praise statements, students tend to be more on task. One of the things that was really interesting, though, was recall that we identified 2 students for Rita, Nick and Cody. The top panel here is identical to the bottom 2 graphs on the previous figure. So you're looking at the data for Rita and for Cody, and you've already seen these. We also collected data on Rita's interactions with the second student, Nick, but we never provided Rita with feedback about how she was doing with Nick. So she never saw these graphs, we never said anything to her about her performance. So the dotted phase change line here denotes when we provided Rita feedback about her interactions with Cody. And you see that when we provide Rita feedback with her interactions with Cody, she stops reprimanding Nick and engages in slightly more praise statements with Nick, and Nick's off-task behavior drops. So this, to me, is a cool finding. Here we have not only finding that behavioral safety, our behavioral skills training is able to produce these changes, but the generalization to a different student is interesting, because it suggests that if we can get to people who are working in a context and who are likely to remain in that context, change their behavior in a relatively durable way, we can produce ongoing change. So I might be able to say now every student that comes into Rita's classroom might benefit from this one training that we did with one student. This is also an example of behavior analysis within this real context. These teachers are operating in a way that is allowing them to come into contact with the reinforcers associated with implementing behavior analysis programs with following recommendations that doesn't require the ongoing presence of a consultant in the classroom. Yet, we still have some limitations. So these teachers already had a fair bit of training in behavior analysis, and that was reflected, you'll remember, through their higher than average rates of praise during baseline. And the fact that praise exceeded reprimands for all the teachers during baseline, we're still only dealing with a few teachers here. It's taking a fair bit of time. So we've got a consultant who's coming in, providing feedback to teachers. This has to happen on an individual level with each of the teachers. If we really want to get contextually important change, this might not be the best way to do it. We wanted to see if we could train individuals within a context, we could train teachers, and bring their behavior really up to standard so that they were functioning as experts within a particular area, if they could train other people, and then those people could train other people, and then those people could train other people. We're running a pyramid scheme. Okay? So we identified an area where we thought it was really important that some of these teachers acquire skills, and that's in running stimulus preference assessments. The details of preference assessments aren't crucial today. What I want to focus on is the evaluation of the possibility of doing this kind of pyramidal instruction to improve the extent to which individuals within a context are exposed to behavior analytic procedures and their behavior changes, and also to determine if teachers with no background in behavior analysis can acquire these skills. So when you're really going out into these organizations, you're often not running into people who have had 3 formal courses in behavior analysis. You're running into people who are being forced to be at this training and do this thing by somebody that they may or may not ever see again. So we wanted to see if this kind of thing would work within this context. So to do that, we identified an expert who is a professional board-certified behavior analyst. that person developed training to train 3 common types of preference assessments. The paired choice assessment, multiple stimulus without replacement, and free operant assessments. Details of those don't matter. Big deal here is they all involve some common components, but some things that are a little different between each assessment. So our expert developed a training and then trained 3 teachers to each implement one of the 3 types of preference assessments. So we had a teacher who was doing well at the paired choice, we had a teacher who was doing well at the MSWO, we had a teacher who was doing well at the free operant. We took those 3 teachers and had them train 6 other teachers. Now, this group of 9 teachers is participating also in our teacher training program. So they're not only getting this instruction on how to do preference assessments, but they're getting broader behavior analytic instruction. And this training occurred in the context of one of those ongoing class meetings using role plays. So where the trainer was functioning as a student and the trainee was practicing the skills. Again, this isn't probably telling us a whole lot about how this kind of training would work in a different organizational structure where people didn't have as much exposure to behavior analysis. So we convinced our local county that it would be great if we could train all of the pre-K teachers in the county on how to do these stimulus preference assessments. So the county agreed to this. We rounded up all 18 pre-K teachers in the county who were your prototypical kinds of trainees who are being required to do a training. Right? Some of them are very enthusiastic, they're excited about new skills, they really want to be there. Some of them are like, how quickly can I go to lunch? So our 3rd tier of trained individuals is now training our 18 pre-K teachers. We're looking at a mastery. This was done during a regularly scheduled youth service day. It took about 3 hours. Okay, so I want to show you the data from our 3rd tier first. So that's these 6 individuals. Each symbol on here shows a different type of preference assessment, and again, the details of those are not necessarily important for this. Just say that during baseline our teachers pulled a type of preference assessment out of an envelope, were told to do the best they could in running that. They didn't do wonderfully at any of the types of preference assessments. Our training involved modeling, role plays, and feedback. We were able to train all of our teachers really rapidly. So notice the really quick acquisition of all the types of skills. One other thing to notice is that typically as training progressed, teachers were able to acquire new types of preference assessments easier. So the first one took a little bit longer, the second one took a little bit less time, but in general never more than 3 opportunities to practice. If you've ever run a stimulus preference assessment, it's not a whole lot of time. And that's great, but that was within this context of a classroom didactic experience where we were sitting down and pretending, working in a role-play situation. We didn't know if these skills would generalize when teachers actually had to run a preference assessment in their classrooms. So we followed them to their classrooms, and we asked them to run a preference assessment. They could choose any kind they wanted, but we required them to continue choosing until they had done at least 1 round of each of the 3 preference assessments. And you can see those data in the generalization phase. So this is running those stimulus preference assessments with a child in their classroom that they work with on a day-to-day basis. And all of our teachers were able to generalize the skills and maintain really high levels of performance across all 3 types of preference assessments. So, what about people who are a little more recalcitrant in their attitudes towards training? I'm going to show you 10 of the data for the 18 pre-K teachers. These are representative for the rest of our sample. Again, the percent correct of how well they're implementing the preference assessments along the y-axis and sessions along the x-axis. Our pre-K teachers, not shockingly, didn't know how to do anything during baseline. So by and large, apart from Olivia, who got some skills at least partially correct during baseline, our pre-K teachers don't have these skills. They're not able to implement any steps. Once we put training in place, though, all of our pre-K teachers acquire and master the skills at least 90% correct on all opportunities. So this suggests that we can have some kind of spread of effects. We can run pyramid schemes when we're doing training, so with a couple of caveats, perhaps. We can train a small group, and that can lead to skill acquisition for a larger group. But I want to harken back to Flo's talk here. The integrity with which that training happens is as important as the integrity with which the participants are able to do the skill. That's a secondary measure that we had that I'm not going to show you. I will tell you, though, that as we went through our tiers of training, the integrity with which the trainers followed the training protocol gradually decreased. In general, what it decreased on was the praise that was provided for correct steps. Corrective feedback tended to maintain and remain high, which is why I think our pre-K teachers were able to acquire the skills as rapidly as they did. But someone looking to implement this type of procedure would have to keep a very careful eye on how well the trainers were doing across time, because you might see some degradation. But it still holds promise for wider spread dissemination, particularly when there aren't enough experts to be able to come in and do training regularly. You're also, again, starting to build the structure and build that context to be self-supporting. So you now don't have to hire and bring in an expert. You can train and work with people within that natural context. We think. But this particular training was still developed by an expert in behavior analysis who created a very detailed task analysis for exactly what the trainer should do to train each type of preference assessment and exactly what the trainee had to do to demonstrate mastery. So it was unclear to us still whether or not we needed to have a consultant role. We needed to have an expert who was going to be there to be able to develop some of these procedures. And so the third thing that I'll talk to you about today came about a little serendipitously. We had been training these teachers who had been participating in the previous studies. They were now getting pretty savvy. And one of our teachers identified a need within her school environment. So what she noticed, she was an autism teacher, and what she noticed was that the paraprofessionals within her school were being underutilized. These were individuals who could make a solid contribution to education and to the instructional time of students, but instead they were being asked to laminate things, cut them out, run photocopies, and they weren't really contributing to instructional time or instructional quality. She found a modest literature supporting advanced training for paraprofessionals and thought, I really need to get my paraprofessionals more involved in my classroom activities. So she initiated and developed a training procedure to teach the paraprofessionals to accurately implement discrete trial. So this was conducted during an in-service day before the start of the academic year. All of the paraprofessionals in the school were required to attend these in-service days. So she just took this time and restructured it. Usually the paraprofessionals were spending that time putting up bulletin boards. She had them participate in this training instead. Two of our trained teachers, our behavior analysis for teachers served as the trainers. These were the ones who had developed the training procedures, and 3 paraprofessionals participated. The 3 paraprofessionals were trained to implement 3 different discrete trial procedures using a rapid training that involved instructions, modeling, and feedback within a role-play situation. Now this was role-play because it was conducted during in-service. Before the academic year, we didn't have access to any students. But we wanted to see whether or not the skills that were acquired during this in-service actually generalized to real students. And we tried to program, I say we, the teachers, tried to program for generalization by teaching 3 different programs in the training process. We didn't know how well the paraprofessionals would really be able to implement this with students and the challenges that working with students with autism sometimes pose, and also with a variety of different programs. So we assessed generalization in the natural environment without structuring what the program was or who the child was. We picked up on naturally occurring discrete trial sessions. These are the data for our 3 paraprofessionals. So remember, during baseline, it's occurring a lot like the baseline of our previous studies where the paraprofessionals are selecting a program out of an envelope. The percent of steps that they're completing correctly is along the y-axis, with sessions along the x-axis. The 3 different symbols are the 3 different programs, details of which, again, are kind of unimportant. 2 of our paraprofessionals were able to implement discrete trial procedures with at least moderate integrity during baseline. Interesting point. These 2 paraprofessionals had been working for a year in a classroom where the teacher frequently and regularly implemented discrete trial sessions. So what you're seeing in the increase in their baseline here, above our 3rd paraprofessional, is probably due to some of that informal modeling. When we implemented our training procedure, which again consisted of watching a brief video model, providing an opportunity to practice, and giving feedback, all three of our paraprofessionals, even CW on the bottom, who was not able to correctly implement any steps before they started training, rapidly acquired all three procedures. Again, probably not shocking, but the generalization is really cool. So what we're getting in the generalization is when these paraprofessionals are now asked to run discrete trial in their classroom with random programs that are individually designed for the particular students that they happen to be working with, they're able to do that with almost 100% integrity. And they're able to do that. Our final points here are at least 3 months following the initial training. So we're getting both generalization and maintenance. So this gives us some more potential for expansion. Teachers can not only provide efficient training procedures, but in some cases they can develop them. In the case of this particular procedure, the way that the teacher designed the training required less time than those that had been demonstrated previously in the literature, and we have some extensive generalization and maintenance data to suggest lasting effects even in the absence of a consultant in this classroom ever. This might make those trainings more contextually appropriate. When I come in as a consultant, if I'm trying to impose something on an organization, I might look at the organization and think, this is what this organization needs. But I'm not part of that organization. I'm still an outsider to what's going on. And so by working in more depth with the individuals who are part of the organization, our trainings become more contextually appropriate, and the individuals within that organization may be better able to identify the specific needs and priorities of that particular organization, which may increase the acceptability of our practices, the buy-in, and the extent to which we get invited back to do more. So I've summarized some of the things that we've been doing with teachers. I think, as I mentioned before, this is not limited to an educational organization and educational context. We've been working on training parents to implement behavior change procedures using video technology. Again, really trying to get dissemination of these materials more broadly across different areas and across geographical barriers. And increasing the extent to which administrators are able to understand the potentials for behavior change. Behavior analysis has gotten very pigeonholed where I live. It is the treatment for autism. And then there's a period at the end of that sentence. Oh. So what we're really trying to do is show administration and show those who are working within these contexts the real potential and the real diversity of behavior analysis, of OBM, of the fact that we can do staff training, we can work with typically developing individuals, we can work with adults, we can make your workplace a happier environment, where your organization is becoming more productive. That's something that's not often very clearly seen, at least in my area. So when we get in touch with these administrators, we're increasing the referrals to behavior analysts. Not only the number, but also the diversity, the scope and the types of referrals that we're getting. And a side effect of this is that we're starting to see some change at a systems and cultural context level. So what we're seeing is, at least in the school district, is that the school district is beginning to explicitly write formal training and behavior analysis into the job descriptions. So to be eligible to have this job, you have to be trained to do X and Y and Z. So what we're doing, I hope, is reducing the extent, I'm trying to put myself out of a job, reducing the extent to which a consultant has to come in and train, and we're trying to build context and try to build these procedures from the ground up. So there's some capacity within the system to have long-lasting behavior change and maintenance of some of these applications. I think that I'm starting to run to the end of my 40, so I would be happy to take questions about these or anything else. Thank you.